Today we're diving into everything we know so far about macOS 16. Apple's annual Worldwide Developers Conference, or WWDC, is usually the stage where they unveil the next generation of their operating systems, and macOS is always a big part of that. We're expecting macOS 16 to be unveiled, and like every year, the anticipation is pretty high. What new features will it bring? Will there be a design refresh? And crucially, which Macs will even get the update? Over the past few months, we've seen Apple push macOS forward in significant ways, especially with the transition to Apple Silicon. Each iteration builds on the last, refining the experience, adding new capabilities, and sometimes throwing in a few surprises. So, in this video, we're going to break down all the credible rumors, the educated guesses based on Apple's patterns, and the potential leaks that have surfaced. This is macOS 16, everything we know so far. So, let's kick things off with one of the most asked questions. When is macOS 16 actually coming out? If Apple sticks to its playbook, and they usually do, we can map out a pretty reliable timeline. The big reveal almost certainly happens at WWDC, typically in early June. That's when Craig Federighi will hit the stage and walk us through the highlight reel of what's new. Immediately after that WWDC keynote, Apple usually drops the first developer beta. This is key for developers to get their apps ready for the new OS, test new APIs, and report any early bugs. Then, a few weeks later, typically in July, we see the first public beta. This is when non-developers can sign up and install macOS 16. By this point, some of the initial bugs from the developer beta have hopefully been ironed out. Following the public beta release, Apple usually releases updated beta versions every few weeks. Each new beta aims to fix bugs, improve performance, and sometimes even tweak features based on feedback. The final stable public release of macOS 16 is then expected in the fall, historically anywhere from late September to late October. This timing often coincides with the release of new Mac hardware. If macOS 16 includes a particularly massive architectural change or complex new features, there's always a chance things could take a little longer. Apple prioritizes stability for the public release, so they won't rush it if it's not ready. They'll announce the developer beta availability at WWDC, and usually give a time frame for the public beta. For the final release, they'll typically say coming this fall, and then get more specific as we get closer. The anticipation for the release date isn't just about getting new features, it's also about the cycle of innovation. For developers, it means new tools and capabilities. For users, it means a refreshed experience and potentially better performance or productivity. The beta program itself is also a good indicator of progress. So, mark your calendars for early June, because that's when the macOS 16 journey will officially begin. Alright, so with the timeline mapped out, let's get to the really exciting part. What new features and improvements can we actually expect in macOS 16? One of the biggest buzzwords in tech right now is AI, and it's almost a certainty that Apple will be making significant strides here with macOS 16. For macOS, this could mean a much smarter, more context-aware Siri that can handle more complex tasks. Apple's strength has always been how seamlessly its devices work together, and I expect macOS 16 to push continuity features even further. Performance optimizations are always on the list, and macOS 16 will undoubtedly be tuned to squeeze even more power and efficiency out of M-series chips. We can also expect updates to core macOS applications. Safari almost always gets some love, with potential improvements in speed, privacy features, and maybe even new tab management or customization options. Mail might see enhancements to organization or smart features. Messages could get some of the new effects or functionalities introduced in iOS. Photos is another candidate for AI-driven improvements, like better search, new editing tools, or enhanced memories. Beyond the usual suspects, there's always room for new productivity tools or refinements to existing ones. Security and privacy are foundational pillars for Apple, so expect macOS 16 to come with another batch of enhancements in these areas. Accessibility is another area where Apple consistently invests and innovates. Each new macOS version typically brings new accessibility features or improvements to existing ones, making Macs more usable for people with disabilities. For developers, macOS 16 will likely introduce new APIs and frameworks, enabling them to build richer and more powerful applications. It's also worth considering the balance Apple strikes between introducing headline-grabbing new features and focusing on stability and refinement. Some macOS releases are more about polish and under-the-hood improvements, while others bring more significant user-facing changes. Given the rapid advancements in AI, I'm leaning towards macOS 16 having a few standout AI-powered features. Ultimately, the feature set of macOS 16 will be a reflection of Apple's strategic priorities for the Mac. Are they focusing on pro users, everyday consumers, or trying to strike a balance? How does the Mac fit into their broader ecosystem strategy, especially with newer products like Vision Pro in the mix? These are the questions that will shape the features we see. It's a complex puzzle, and Apple's engineers have been working on it for at least a year. So, when a new macOS version drops, one of the first things many of us look for are the visual changes. Will macOS 16 bring a radical design overhaul, or will it be more about subtle refinements? Based on Apple's recent design philosophy for macOS, which has been evolutionary rather than revolutionary since Big Sur, I'm betting on the latter. Big Sur was a pretty significant visual refresh, and Apple tends to let those major redesigns settle for a few years. That being said, subtle refinements doesn't mean no changes at all. We could definitely see tweaks to iconography, perhaps making icons feel a bit more modern, or aligning them more closely with the design language of iOS and Vision OS. Typography is another area where Apple sometimes makes small adjustments for better legibility or a slightly updated feel. Dark mode has become a staple for many users, myself included, and Apple could continue to refine it in macOS 16. This might involve better consistency across all apps, deeper blacks where appropriate, or perhaps more customization options for how dark mode behaves. Widgets got a big boost in interactivity and placement options on the desktop in recent macOS versions. It's plausible that macOS 16 could expand on this. We might see even more interactive widgets, new sizes, or perhaps an improved gallery for discovering and managing widgets. The Control Center and Notification Center are other UI elements that often see iterative improvements. Apple might look for ways to make them more customizable, more efficient to use, or better integrated with focus modes. Window management is a perennial topic of discussion for Mac users. While Stage Manager was Apple's recent big swing in this area, there's always room for more options or refinements. Consistency across the Apple ecosystem is a key design goal. As iOS, iPadOS, and now Vision OS evolve, Apple often tries to bring a sense of familiarity and shared design language to macOS where it makes sense. Ultimately, any design changes in macOS 16 will be driven by Apple's desire to enhance usability, improve aesthetics, and maintain a modern feel, all while respecting the Mac's unique identity. We'll be looking closely at those first beta screenshots to spot all the changes, big and small. A new macOS release is always exciting, but it also brings that annual question: will my current Mac be able to run it? Hardware compatibility is a crucial factor, and Apple usually draws a line in the sand each year, cutting off support for some older models. So, what can we expect from macOS 16? The trend has been a clear focus on Apple Silicon Macs, and that's likely to continue and even accelerate. Apple is well into its transition away from Intel chips, and each new macOS version tends to solidify the dominance of Apple Silicon. This means that Macs with M1, M2, M3, and any future M-series chips are almost guaranteed to be supported by macOS 16. The bigger question is always about the older Intel-based Macs. Apple has been gradually phasing out support for these models. With macOS Sonoma, for example, we saw some Intel Macs from around 2017 and 2018 lose support. It's reasonable to expect that macOS 16 will raise the bar again, potentially dropping support for more Intel Macs. The exact cutoff list is something Apple announces at WWDC, and it's always a moment of anxiety for users with aging hardware. Factors that Apple considers include the raw processing power of the CPU and GPU, the presence of specific hardware features like the Neural Engine, and the T2 security chip. If a Mac doesn't meet certain hardware thresholds required for the new OS features to run smoothly and securely, it's likely to be left behind. It's also important to remember that even if an older Mac is technically supported, some of the new features in macOS 16 might be limited or unavailable on that hardware. Apple's strategy for phasing out older models is multifaceted. For users, checking the official compatibility list once it's released by Apple will be paramount before attempting an upgrade. For macOS 16, the safest bet is that if you have an Apple Silicon Mac, you're good to go. So, no tech preview would be complete without diving into the leaks and insider information, right? Apple is notoriously secretive, but information still manages to trickle out. giving us hints about what might be coming in macOS 16. It's important to take all of this with a grain of salt, as not all rumors pan out. Names like Mark Gurman and Ming-Chi Kuo often come up in Apple leaks. They have sources within Apple or its supply chain and have historically provided accurate insights. Clues can be found in code snippets within current iOS or macOS betas. Developers often comb through these resources looking for unannounced features. Supply chain information can occasionally hint at software features. New hardware components in upcoming Macs imply that the OS will need to support them. Apple's intense secrecy is legendary. They go to great lengths to prevent leaks, and employees are under strict NDAs. When information does get out, it's often through carefully cultivated sources or unintentional slip-ups. It's crucial to differentiate between different types of leaks. Some are well-sourced reports from established journalists, others are anonymous forum posts. Evaluating the credibility of the source is key. Recent patent filings from Apple can also offer some clues. Companies often patent ideas they may never implement just to protect their intellectual property. Sometimes a patent filing can align with other rumors, suggesting active development. The rumor mill itself is a fascinating ecosystem. One rumor can spawn dozens of articles and videos, each adding its own layer of speculation. Sometimes the collective wisdom of the crowd can get surprisingly close to the truth. As we head towards the macOS 16 reveal, we'll be keeping a close eye on reports from trusted sources. Just remember, until Craig Federighi is on stage at WWDC showing it off, nothing is truly confirmed. So, that's pretty much everything we know, or at least strongly suspect, about macOS 16 at this point. From the expected release timeline kicking off at WWDC in June, to the potential for significant AI-driven features, subtle but meaningful design refinements, and the all-important question of which Macs will get the update, there's a lot to look forward to and keep an eye on. The leaks and insider info add another layer of intrigue, painting a picture of what Apple might be working on behind those closed doors in Cupertino. The real details will only be confirmed when Apple officially unveils macOS 16. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with the latest tech news, especially as we get closer to WWDC and more concrete information starts to surface. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.